The bearskin cap was still tumbling through the London air when the crowd stopped breathing. Somewhere, a camera shutter caught 3 frames of it: black fur, blue sky, black fur again, while Ryan Cole realized, too late, that the statue wasn't a statue at all. The palace stones held the sound of his heel like a secret. And then, impossibly, the guard moved. 24 minutes earlier, the morning on the Mall slid in crisp and weightless, as if Buckingham Palace were exhaling after a long night. Buses hissed by the gates. Tourists pressed to the railings with phones lifted, elbows tucked in tight. The metal smelled faintly of rain and Old Polish. A tour guide's voice circled overhead in French, then German, then English again, tidily refusing to be interesting. Ryan stood a little apart, camera ready without trying, a designer tracksuit cutting lines across his frame. He didn't lean on anything. Posture was branding. Slouching looked like doubt. On his wrist, a stainless steel Rolex picked the sun into clean points. The light loved him. That had never been a problem. His phone buzzed once. He didn't need to look to know from whom. The timing was predictable. Still, he glanced. Sponsor. Big week. Make it viral today. Beneath it, a second message. Clip or it didn't happen. The message burned quick and cold and was gone. Ryan slid the phone into his pocket. No need to think about it yet. He turned his head just enough to catch his reflection in a tourist's sunglasses. Headlines lived in that reflection. World champion, the unstoppable, the system, his system. Across California, the dojos were tiled in white and gray and light wood, the way successful things often are. The crowd pressed, the rope bowed, the palace glittered. A voice behind him, Jin, kept it low. You sure about this, coach? Ryan smiled without turning. Relax. We are educating the internet. A small ripple of laughter from Marcus Reed, compact and coiled, ears scarred by years of long rounds. Define educating. Ryan lifted a hand, calm, then stepped closer to the red-coated figure standing a dozen yards inside the fence. The uniform was immaculate. Scarlet tunic, brass buttons, rifle held vertical in that stylized calm. But it wasn't the attire that caught Ryan's eye. It was the absence of everything else. No fidget. No blink he could time. No breath he could count. It was like watching the minute hand on a clock refuse to move, unsettling precisely because there was no reason for it to unsettle. He let his gaze travel as if breaking down an opponent from the feet up. Black boots polished into little suns. Ankles dead straight. Knees soft, but not slack. Hips stacked over heels with the kind of geometry you get only from boredom, repetition, or a set of rules that reward both. A glimpse of skin at the wrist where the glove pressed. A thin, pale notch of healed cut, too straight to be accidental. The kind of scar that belongs to a life the internet doesn't film. Ryan exhaled through his nose, the way he taught kids to do when they felt the room watching them. This, he said, not loud, just enough for his circle to hear, is what they call security. Jin's breath hitched. We are here to watch the changing, right? Not to. To what? Ryan shrugged. Somewhere on Earth it's always Saturday night. People want to see something real. Real. Marcus's mouth made the word flat on purpose. But he didn't say more. Curious faces turned. Americans with ball caps and a family from Stuttgart with a stroller. The stroller's wheels squeaked once, 2 tiny complaints, then fell in with the morning. A grey-haired man in a dark jacket stood off to the right, hands behind his back, the small neat medals on his lapel catching bits of sun. He watched the way a man watches his old regiment on parade, measuring and not measuring at once. Ryan stepped closer to the rail, keeping his voice conversational enough to disarm. In my world, he said, stillness is an invitation. He wasn't talking to the guard. He was talking to the phones. People respond better when you help them overhear. The guard, a single syllable of story held upright, didn't flicker. The eyes were forward, the chin a clean long line above the tunic collar. If he was listening, he wasn't making the mistake of acting like it. Name? Marcus asked. Ryan glanced at the little brass plate fixed to the nearby post. Guard post D useless. He looked back up. Doesn't matter. The grey-haired man with the medals let the crowd close by half a step, then another. His shoes made a different sound on the pavement, lighter, somehow, like someone who had spent a lifetime landing softly on hard things. When the sunlight caught his profile, the recognition clicked. Colonel James Walker. Ryan had seen a clip months ago of Walker speaking to a school. Clear voice, no sermon, eyes that didn't apologize for the world they'd seen. Ryan met the colonel's gaze for a beat, polite, untroubled, then broke it the way you break a clinch, with intention, no heat. "Let me give you a little free seminar," Ryan said. The smile pulled a millimeter wider. "A real fighter stays awake. He moves. He sees the punch coming before the punch decides to exist." A couple of phones lifted higher. Someone whispered his name. Ryan let the whisper hang like a banner. He loosened his shoulders. The day brightened obediently. "Look at that stance," he went on, almost kindly. "No center of gravity. No defensive posture. That's not combat. That's costume." Jin breathed out, long. In their trainings, Ryan's voice could float men across oceans. Today, it floated itself. He traced half a circle along the rail, never turning his back to the guard, feet placing themselves as if they already knew the route. The barrel of the rifle gleamed. The palace caught a cloud and put it back down in gold. Ryan raised both hands, palms open to show the crowd nothing was being touched and everything was being seen. "Education," he said. "This is education." Above the hum, a little boy somewhere asked, "Mum, can they move?" The mother shushed him gently, a laugh under the shush, the way mothers often carry both. Colonel Walker's voice, when it came, carried about as far as a well-aimed coin toss. "Son," he said, not unkindly, "don't." Ryan's smile didn't change. "We are just talking, Colonel." "You're performing," Walker returned. "Not an accusation. A diagnosis." Ryan's phone buzzed again, pocket vibration, short and sharp. He didn't look. He could look later and see the words anyway. Clip or it didn't happen. It didn't matter which human had typed them. The internet uses many thumbs. It is one mind. He shortened the distance by an inch, then two. He was careful about line of sight, about angles, about giving every lens the cleanest possible story. Close enough to taste the polish on the air, not close enough to touch. The guard's face was younger than Ryan wanted it to be, and older, too, the way faces sometimes are when they're asked to hold contradictions for long stretches of hours. He saw it then, the tell. Not a blink, not a swallow, not the tiny flecks of jaw muscle he might have bet on. The guard's left foot shifted a thickness of a coin. It wouldn't have read on video. It barely registered to the naked eye. But the weight transferred with intention, a microstance that drew a triangle on the stones only the body that made it could see. Ryan filed it without thinking. "So you're not a statue. You're a decision." He turned a fraction, putting Marcus and Jin into the edges of his view. Both men were in shape to frighten shadows. Marcus's hands were loose at his sides, ready without announcing readiness. Jin's chin had the tilt he got when he didn't like the math but trusted the mathematician. "Remember Tokyo." Marcus murmured, almost nostalgic. 40 seconds. 38, Ryan corrected, because accuracy wasn't optional. And he was better than this. Walker's gaze didn't leave Ryan. "Do you know what this post is?" he asked. "A tourist attraction," Ryan said. "Easy. A very honorable one." "A duty," Walker said, and the word landed with a solid, unglamorous weight. "You may find you prefer attractions." A couple by the rail, Midwestern vowels and a cheerful camera, angled for a selfie with Ryan centered behind them. He gave them the half-smile he kept for strangers who thought they knew him. The woman mouthed thank you, the man mouthed dude. The little red video light blinked on and off and on. Ryan rolled his wrists. The bones made the small dry noises bones make when they've been used well for many years. He could feel the room come to him, the way crowds lean into confidence like plants into sun. He addressed them, palms open, voice dip half a notch to pull ears closer. "What you're seeing here," he said, "is the difference between tradition and combat, between standing and surviving." He tossed the words lightly so they'd look heavier. He didn't say violence. He never says violence. He says education and system and precision and lets other people bring the rest. He slid his right foot, the barest whisper, testing where the rail's shadow fell across the stones. The guard's eyes were the exact color of a winter sky, the kind that promises snow and then does whatever it wants. Ryan lifted his hands, shaped the air. He made jabs that stopped a good 12 inches short, crisp enough for the microphones on the phones to pick the tiny snaps of sleeve. No blink. No retreat. The young mother with the stroller shuffled a foot back. Her child reached 2 fingers out toward the air and pinched them closed, like catching a tiny bird. See? Ryan told the crowd, friendly as a neighbor with a new grill. Nothing. That's not discipline. That's policy. Jin's head tilted. He wasn't smiling now. What's your name, soldier? Ryan asked, because sometimes men answer questions they don't need to answer. The guard didn't. Names aren't for parades. Names are for after. Ryan tasted the line he wanted next. He could feel the beat where it would land. He widened his stance a shade, breath smooth, heart agreeable. He had done this 1,000 times, in rings, on mats, on stages with floodlights that made sweat into ocean. The body obeyed. The voice followed. He imagined the clips, the ones the sponsor would prefer, the ones that would harvest themselves. He imagined the cut, his heel a black arc, the cap flying, the caption written by someone with rent to pay. He imagined the comments, the devotion, the hate, the algorithm's warm hand on the small of his back, pushing, pushing. He stepped back half a pace so the phones could see all of him, so the palace could place itself like a fan behind his shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, and the crowd did the thing crowds always do. They quieted because they wanted to be included. Let me show you something you can actually use. Walker's jaw tightened, only a little. Don't do this, he said. Ryan smiled like a closing door. Now, he announced, every syllable clean, every angle designed, for my final demonstration. The silence between the crowd and the guards stretched until it felt deliberate. Cameras hovered in midair. The square breathed once, twice. Then someone coughed, and the spell cracked just enough for Ryan Cole to step forward again. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. See this, he said to the onlookers, palms open like a preacher unveiling scripture. They train them to freeze, not to fight. The guard, Will Harrison, did not blink. Ryan's eyes sharpened. Completely vulnerable. No center of gravity. No defensive posture. His tone carried the patient scorn of a man who believed he was teaching. All that ceremonial garbage would get him destroyed in a real fight. A nervous laugh flickered through the tourists. The sound of a bus engine drifted in, then faded, leaving only the echo of his words against the palace stone. On the fringe of the crowd, Colonel James Walker adjusted the cuff of his jacket, watching. He had seen 1,000 confrontations start exactly this way, with a man mistaking silence for surrender. Ryan rolled his shoulders, the motion rippling through muscles that had earned him medals and followers. Let me show you what a real fighter looks like, he said, and stepped closer. Jin muttered under his breath, Coach. But Ryan had already slipped into motion. His feet described a perfect semicircle, every step measured, deliberate. A real fighter is always ready, he lectured, always moving, always aware. He dropped into a loose stance, body shifting with the economy of long practice. To the cameras, it looked effortless. To Walker, it looked rehearsed. Ryan began to circle Harrison slowly, searching for tells. Look at this poor guy. They've trained all the instinct out of him, he said, as if diagnosing a flaw in a student. He darted a few steps left, then right, entering Harrison's peripheral vision deliberately. In a real fight, this kind of rigidity gets you killed. Gasps and murmurs rippled outward. A few tourists stepped back. A family from Germany whispered to each other. The father gently steered his children away. Others leaned in, drawn by the electricity of something unscripted. You know what we are looking at? Ryan asked, gesturing toward the guard as though unveiling an exhibit. The difference between ceremony and combat. These men perform, we fight. He shot 3 lightning-quick jabs that stopped inches short of Harrison's chin, the air cracking from speed. Every move I make is built for one purpose, victory. Walker's frown deepened. He shifted closer, the medals on his lapel catching a pulse of sun. Ladies and gentlemen. Ryan's voice rose, suddenly theatrical. What you're witnessing is the gap between British tradition and actual combat effectiveness. He swept an arm toward Harrison with a performer's precision. These guards represent a bygone era when standing still was called courage. The murmurs thickened. Jin and Marcus exchanged looks. Both knew that tone. Ryan wasn't demonstrating anymore. He was performing for the algorithm. Marcus whispered, You're losing them, man. Ryan ignored him. I'll give you a live comparison, he said, motioning them forward. Form the ring. The 4 men spread out instinctively, creating a perimeter around Harrison. The movement looked casual but carried the weight of routine. Fighters rehearsed in closing space. Phones lifted higher. A murmur of anticipation coiled through the onlookers. "This," Ryan said, nodding to Jin, tall, stoic, hands wrapped in tape, "is three-time kickboxing world champion Jin Park. And this," pointing to Marcus Reed, compact, shoulders dense with years of grappling, former welterweight MMA title holder. He turned slowly, letting the moment build. "We train warriors who win real fights, not actors who win costume contests." A British veteran near the back let out a low sound that was neither laugh nor word. His wife tugged his sleeve. "Leave it," she whispered. He didn't. "Watch how a real fighter moves," Ryan said, stepping in again. His fists blurred, a flurry of precise, lethal shapes cutting the air. The blows stopped within inches of the guard's tunic. Every motion has purpose, intent, lethal potential. Nothing wasted. Harrison remained motionless. Colonel Walker threaded through the bystanders, quiet authority parting them. His gaze locked on the young American. What worried him wasn't the fighter. It was the moment before discipline broke protocol. Ryan paced, voice climbing. "You see the flaw in military training," he called. "It's designed for group thinking. Obey. Hold formation. Kill individuality." He began to orbit the guard again. But martial arts, real combat, is about excellence. About evolution. Then, almost lazily, he spun, a perfect whip kick that whispered past Harrison's ear. The displacement of air tugged at the tall bearskin cap. The crowd gasped. Several people stumbled back. Ryan straightened, grinning. "Notice he doesn't even blink," he said. "That's not discipline, folks. That's fear." He planted himself squarely in front of the guard, hands on hips. "In my dojo, we teach people to overcome that fear, to act, to engage, to live in reality." A woman nearby clutched her child's hand. "This is disrespectful," she murmured. "We are leaving." Others followed, the crowd splitting into halves, those backing away, and those staying, caught in the magnet of spectacle. Walker's voice cut across them, calm but edged. "Mr. Cole, step back." Ryan tilted his head, smile unbothered. "Colonel, with respect, this is educational content." Walker's jaw tightened. "So is a firing range. But the targets there don't bleed." Ryan laughed softly, a sound too close to contempt. "Don't worry. I'm just proving a point." He turned once more toward the silent guard, hands rising in a boxer's rhythm. "And for that," he said, "we'll need a proper demonstration." The words rolled across the courtyard like a match striking concrete. Phones steadied. The crowd hushed. Walker took one decisive step forward. But Ryan's men shifted as one, closing ranks. The sound changed first. The courtyard's gentle murmur flattened into a hum, crowd, wind, footsteps, all folding into one quiet line. Even the pigeons above the palace roof seemed to pause, mid-wing beat. Inside that pause, Ryan Cole adjusted his stance. It was the same routine he'd done before every final match. Loosen the shoulders, center the breath, narrow the focus until the world became edges and distance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said lightly, "let's talk about why static defense doesn't work." He shifted his weight from heel to ball, eyes locked on guard Will Harrison. The man in scarlet stood as he had all morning, silent, unblinking, a figure carved from patience. Walker saw it coming. He'd seen this choreography before, though never in a place like this. "Son," he began. But Ryan had already moved. One heartbeat. The crowd drew air. He stepped forward, pivoted, and launched. A perfect spinning heel kick. The motion sliced through sunlight. His heel connected with a crack that ricocheted across the courtyard. A mother screamed. Cameras flashed. The bearskin cap exploded into the air, a dark comet arcing against the blue sky. For a breathless second, time collapsed. The cap reached its peak, turned over once, and began to fall. Ryan landed smoothly, textbook form, shoulders squared, grin spreading. The crowd stared. The guard hadn't moved. No stumble. No collapse. His head had snapped sideways with the impact, but his boots hadn't left their line. A thin red line traced from his temple to his jaw, bright against the scarlet uniform. Then the eyes moved. Not blinking, not panicked, simply locking. Every trained fighter in the audience recognized it instantly, the look of a man calculating range. Ryan's grin faltered. And that, he started, voice thin with adrenaline, is why. He never finished the sentence. Will Harrison moved. It wasn't fast the way Ryan's kicks were fast. It was efficient, a kind of speed that looked smaller than it felt, the kind that swallowed space without warning. His rifle hit the stones with a dull clatter as he closed the distance in 3 silent steps. Ryan reacted on instinct, dropping into guard, adrenaline flushing his limbs. Now we are talking, he said, but the words sounded hollow. Let's see what they actually teach you soldiers. The answer arrived before the question finished. Harrison's first strike landed like punctuation, a palm heel to the sternum, short and brutal, enough to empty Ryan's lungs. No warning, no sound. Just contact, followed by stillness. Ryan staggered back 2 steps, body reacting faster than his mind could frame the event. He tried to reset, to read the angle, but Harrison was already moving again. Precise, surgical, zero waste. The crowd gasped, the ring of tourists breaking into murmurs and frantic camera clicks. Walker didn't move. His face had changed, not fear, not shock, but the grim patience of a man watching consequences arrive. Ryan blocked the next strike, barely, his forearms jolting with the force. He countered, snapping a kick toward Harrison's ribs, the kind that had ended tournaments on 3 continents. The guard caught the leg midair. The motion was fluid, practiced. 1 twist, 1 step forward. And the world flipped. Ryan hit the ground hard, the thud echoing like an accusation. Dust rose. His breath left him in a hoarse, involuntary sound. Before he could roll away, Harrison was on him. 1 knee pressed into his chest, the pressure calculated to immobilize, not injure. The rifle still lay on the ground beside them, forgotten but within reach if needed. Stay down, Harrison said. It was the first time he'd spoken. His voice carried no anger, only the clipped authority of command, trained, measured, final. Ryan froze, the realization dawning cold. This wasn't a match, and there were no referees here. Around them, phones captured everything. Some tourists had stopped recording, others couldn't look away. The German father held his children close, whispering something low and fast. Colonel Walker pushed through the ring at last. Ryan's team didn't stop him this time. Their confidence had evaporated into disbelief. Walker crouched slightly, not near enough to interfere, just enough that his voice would carry. Mr. Cole, he said, level and clear. You've just received a free education. Ryan tried to speak, air scraping his throat. Walker's eyes didn't leave him. That, he continued, nodding toward Harrison, is the difference between performing combat and surviving it. For a long second, no one moved. The cap lay on the ground beside the guard's boot, shadows stretched across the stone. A drop of blood fell, darkening the edge of red fabric. Then the palace bells began to chime the hour, breaking the silence at last. And just like that, the courtyard exhaled again. But nothing in it felt the same. The echo of the impact still hung in the air, long after the bells had stopped. The crowd stood frozen, half in awe, half in disbelief, as Guardwell Harrison rose smoothly to his feet. His rifle remained on the stones, but his composure returned like a command obeyed. He adjusted his tunic once, eyes forward again, posture immaculate, as if the last 30 seconds had been a hallucination shared by everyone watching. Only the thin streak of blood tracing down his temple betrayed that anything had happened at all. Ryan Cole lay on the ground for a moment, gasping, his chest rising against the pressure memory of the knee that had pinned him. The world around him blurred, faces, phones, the glint of metals on a jacket that now stepped closer. Colonel James Walker crouched beside him, his voice even, steady. Don't move just yet. You'll make the dizziness worse. Ryan's answer came out in a ragged breath. He can't do that. I was demonstrating. Walker's tone was flat as polished steel. Guard Harrison can do considerably more than he's currently demonstrating. And you, Mr. Cole, are lucky he stopped where he did. The words hit harder than the strike had. Walker stood, turning toward the nearest palace security officer already approaching from across the courtyard, radio crackling with clipped urgency. Secure the area, he ordered, and get medical and command on site immediately. Yes, sir. Phones still recorded. Some tourists whispered apologies into their cameras, others lowered them, suddenly aware they'd filmed something that no longer felt like entertainment. The German family was gone. The young mother with the stroller was crying quietly, her child asleep or pretending to be. Ryan pushed himself upright, his hands trembling not from injury but from something colder, humiliation. The four men who'd surrounded him moments ago no longer looked like a team. Jin avoided his gaze. Marcus Reed's jaw was tight, his arms folded across his chest. What the hell just happened? Marcus muttered. Jin shook his head slowly. You went too far, man. He warned you. Ryan wiped a smear of dust from his sleeve, voice hoarse. It was supposed to be a demonstration. Walker turned back to face him, cutting him off. You assaulted a serving member of His Majesty's Guard during an active duty post. That's not a demonstration, that's an offense. Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but the colonel continued before he could. Before his assignment here, Harrison served with the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. 4 combat deployments, 2 commendations for valor. Ryan froze. The words landed like an aftershock. The ceremonial duties you've been mocking, Walker said, are performed by soldiers who've already earned the right to stand here. This uniform isn't decoration, it's discipline. Silence again. The crowd was listening now, not for spectacle, but for sense. A palace security commander arrived, nodding briskly to Walker. Colonel, we'll take it from here. Walker nodded back. Guard Harrison has the situation well in hand. Ryan's head turned slowly toward Harrison, who still stood motionless at attention, rifle once again in hand. The guard's breathing was controlled, calm, unbroken, as though the fight had been nothing more than another drill. A fresh drop of blood slid down his cheek. He didn't wipe it. He didn't move. The commander frowned. Sir, do you require medical assistance? No, sir, Harrison replied simply, voice low but steady. All under control. Walker folded his hands behind his back, turning to address the tourists who had yet to leave. For those of you filming, understand what you just witnessed. These guards are active soldiers, not museum pieces. They are trained to stand still because discipline under pressure is harder than motion under fear. No one spoke. Ryan's team backed away slightly, letting the line of security personnel through. His confidence had drained out of him entirely, leaving a man who looked smaller than the figure who had strutted into the courtyard 20 minutes ago. Walker regarded him one last time. You wanted to show the difference between performance and combat, he said. You succeeded. Just not in the way you planned. Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't know. Walker's eyes softened, only slightly. Most people don't. That's why men like him stand here, to remind you that control is not weakness. It's mastery. Across the square, the tourists began to disperse. The excitement had curdled into unease. A few still whispered, a few still filmed, but the tone had changed completely. A uniformed officer approached Walker with a phone. Sir, Command wants an immediate briefing. They're also requesting we take the assailant into custody for questioning. Walker nodded. Understood. He turned to Ryan. You'll cooperate. Ryan didn't resist. His eyes were on Harrison, who hadn't so much as blinked since returning to position. Before you leave, Walker added quietly, look at him. You kicked him, humiliated yourself, and he still stands his post. That's discipline. That's what real strength looks like. Ryan looked. The image burned itself into him, a scarlet figure, unshaken, unarmed yet unbreakable, standing in a pool of sunlight and blood no bigger than a coin. Palace security closed in around him. Jin followed reluctantly, Marcus trailing behind. Walker gave one last nod to Harrison. The guard didn't return it. Protocol forbade it. But there was something in the stillness, an understanding shared between men who knew what control cost. As the officers led Ryan away, his phone buzzed again in his pocket. He didn't need to check the screen to know the words waiting there. Clip or it didn't happen. He let the message go unread. And as he crossed the courtyard, one thought followed him like a shadow that wouldn't leave. He'd spent years mastering motion. But today, stillness had beaten him. The echo of boots on marble carried through the narrow corridor. The air inside Buckingham Palace was cooler than the courtyard, quieter, heavier. Ryan Cole walked between 2 palace security officers, hands free but shoulders squared like a man already in a different kind of cage. They brought him into a small security office, bright and sterile, walls lined with surveillance monitors showing frozen stills of the courtyard, the guard, the tourists, the fallen cap, the kick. The footage looped silently. On the far side of the room stood Colonel James Walker, arms folded. Behind him, a staff sergeant took notes in a hardbound ledger. The atmosphere was professional, not punitive, but it felt colder than handcuffs. Walker gestured to a chair. "Sit." Ryan obeyed without protest. His throat felt raw. Adrenaline had long since drained, leaving only a pulsing exhaustion. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Walker asked. Ryan looked at the monitor, the moment of the kick playing again and again, slow, merciless. "I thought it would be harmless. I've done 1,000 demonstrations like that." Walker's eyes didn't move. Demonstrations don't involve assaulting soldiers on duty. "I didn't think he'd react like that." "You didn't think he could react like that," Walker corrected, voice clipped. "That's the difference." Silence stretched. Ryan exhaled, rubbed his eyes. "Look, I made a mistake. A bad one. But I wasn't trying to hurt him. It was for a video. The sponsor." He stopped himself, realizing how it sounded. Walker's brow furrowed. "The sponsor." Ryan hesitated, then sighed. "They wanted something viral. Something that made me look unstoppable. They pushed for it. Said everyone's doing it. Reaction videos, shock moments, challenges. I didn't plan for it to go that far." Walker nodded slowly, the understanding not softening his judgment. "And yet, here we are." The door opened. Guard Will Harrison entered. He'd changed into his regulation fatigue uniform. No scarlet tunic now, no bearskin cap. Only the faint red mark across his temple remained, cleaned and treated but visible. His posture, however, hadn't changed. Ryan looked up and swallowed. "You're—" Harrison nodded to the colonel. "Sir." Walker gestured toward him. "Guard Harrison has been debriefed and cleared medically. He insisted on speaking to you before the paperwork proceeds." Ryan straightened, uncertain whether to stand or stay seated. Harrison crossed the room and stopped 2 paces away, boots aligned, hands clasped behind him. "Why didn't you fight back sooner?" Ryan asked quietly. Harrison studied him for a moment, his voice calm. "Protocol. We are trained to exercise restraint unless directly attacked. You crossed that line." Ryan nodded, shame threading through his tone. "I thought you were just a ceremonial guard. I didn't know." "Few civilians do," Harrison said. "That's why we stand here, so people can see what control looks like." Walker interjected, his tone measured. Before this post, Guard Harrison served in the Special Reconnaissance Regiment, 4 tours, 2 commendations. He's no stranger to real combat. Ryan blinked, absorbing that. "You mean Afghanistan?" Harrison nodded once. "And Syria?" Ryan leaned back, stunned. "Then why this? Why guard duty after that?" "Because not every battle is fought overseas," Harrison said quietly. "Sometimes discipline itself is the war. And stillness," he paused, "is the weapon." The room fell silent again. The hum of the monitors was the only sound. Ryan spoke carefully. "I didn't see that. I saw a target." Harrison's tone didn't change. "You saw what you wanted to see." Walker folded his arms tighter. "And now you'll live with what you didn't." Ryan turned toward him. "So what happens now?" Walker gestured to the sergeant. "You'll be processed for formal charges: assault on an active duty soldier, disruption of state ceremonial duty, public disturbance." Ryan's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. "Understood." Harrison's gaze softened by a fraction. "It's not my job to decide what happens to you. But if you want to learn something from this, stop mistaking silence for weakness." Ryan nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Walker turned toward the sergeant. "Hold the paperwork for now. I want the commanding officer's directive before this goes to the press. This incident will be all over the networks within hours. Let's ensure the truth gets there first." The sergeant saluted lightly and stepped out. Walker regarded Ryan for another long second. "You wanted viral fame. You'll have it. Just not the kind you hoped for." Ryan didn't look up. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Guess so." Harrison turned toward the door, pausing just before leaving. "There's something you should know," he said without turning back. "When you hit me, I didn't move because I was calculating distance. Between us. Between you and the child behind you." Ryan froze. What? There was a boy behind you. If I'd dodged, you'd have gone through him. Harrison's voice stayed even. So I took the kick. The words landed like a stone dropped into water. Ryan sat still, the weight of it sinking deeper with every passing second. You took it on purpose. Harrison looked over his shoulder briefly. A soldier's stillness protects more than himself. He left. The door closed softly behind him. Walker spoke without looking away from the monitors. That's what you didn't understand, Mr. Cole. Stillness isn't surrender. It's control. Ryan stared at the looping footage again, the frozen frame of his own heel colliding with a man who never flinched. For the first time all morning, he had no words. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the high windows of the palace security wing, soft and indifferent. Outside, the routine continued as if nothing had happened. The rhythmic cadence of drills, the measured steps of guards changing positions, the murmur of tourists gathering for photos. Inside, Ryan Cole sat alone in a holding room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. His designer tracksuit, once a symbol of swagger, was rumpled, streaked with the dust of yesterday's humiliation. His phone had been confiscated. The silence was thick, filled only by the quiet hum of air conditioning and the faint sound of marching boots somewhere beyond the corridor. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had broken boards, shattered tiles, and lifted trophies, now trembling slightly. The pain in his ribs was gone. What remained was heavier, lodged somewhere deeper. The door opened. A palace security officer stepped in, professional, neutral. Mr. Cole, you've been cleared for temporary release. Your formal hearing will be scheduled after the official report is submitted. Ryan nodded. Can I speak to him again? The guard. The officer paused. He's off ceremonial duty for now. But if Guard Harrison agrees, I can arrange it. Moments later, Will Harrison entered, dressed in his standard combat fatigues, olive drab instead of scarlet. The bruise on his temple had darkened slightly, a muted badge of reality. Ryan stood as he entered. You didn't have to come. I volunteered, Harrison said simply. Thought you might want clarity before you go. Ryan hesitated, then gestured toward the chair opposite him. I owe you that. More than that, actually. Harrison sat down, posture precise as ever. The faint scent of antiseptic followed him, mingling with the cold air of the room. Ryan took a deep breath. When you said yesterday that you didn't move because there was a kid behind me. Harrison nodded once. That's correct. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you weren't ready to listen. The words landed quietly but deeply. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know, all my life, I thought control meant domination. Winning. Making the other guy back down. Yesterday, he shook his head. I saw control for the first time, and it wasn't me. Harrison didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained steady, patient. Control, he said finally, isn't about overpowering someone else. It's about mastering yourself when everything in you wants to react. Ryan gave a small, rueful laugh. You sound like one of my old senseis. Only, he never had to stand in front of a crowd with a lunatic kicking at his head. Harrison's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. Discipline doesn't change with the environment. Whether it's a war zone or a palace courtyard, the principle is the same. The silence stretched again, but it wasn't uncomfortable this time. Ryan exhaled slowly. You ever get tired of it? Holding it all in. Every soldier does, Harrison replied. But restraint isn't suppression. It's choice. Every day you choose what defines you, the moment or the mission. Ryan nodded, absorbing the words. And your mission yesterday? Harrison's gaze softened. To stand my ground. Nothing more. For the first time, Ryan looked him directly in the eyes, not as a rival, but as a man facing the mirror of his own arrogance. You could have broken me, Ryan said. You didn't. That wasn't the objective, Harrison replied. You needed a lesson, not an injury. Ryan gave a bitter smile. Well, lesson learned. The hard way. The security officer re-entered, holding a clipboard. Mr. Cole, you'll be escorted out now. Your legal counsel will be in touch. Ryan turned to Harrison once more. Before I go, I want to ask something. Not for the cameras, not for publicity. For me. Harrison tilted his head slightly. Would you teach me? The words hung in the air, strange, heavy, genuine. Harrison studied him carefully. You already have training. Yeah, Ryan admitted. In fighting. Not in what you have. For a moment, Harrison said nothing. Then, with quiet conviction, he replied, Discipline can't be taught in a day, Mr. Cole. But humility is a good first lesson. Ryan's throat tightened. Guess I finally passed that one. Harrison rose, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. Maybe. As Harrison turned to leave, Ryan spoke again, softer this time. Yesterday, I thought standing still was weakness. Now I know it takes more strength than I've ever had. Harrison paused at the door, looked back over his shoulder. Then don't waste what you've learned. He left, boots echoing down the hallway. Ryan stood alone for several moments, the silence around him no longer empty but full of realization, consequence, and something new, resolve. He looked once more at his reflection in the polished surface of the table. The champion who once saw himself as untouchable now saw a man stripped of ego, but not of purpose. For the first time in years, Ryan felt like a student again. The following morning, Buckingham Palace returned to its rhythm, the crisp cadence of boots striking cobblestones, the echo of distant commands, the collective breath of a crowd waiting for a tradition older than any of them. Guard Will Harrison stood once again at his post, scarlet tunic immaculate, bearskin cap perfectly aligned, rifle gleaming in the pale London light. From a distance, he looked indistinguishable from any of the other guards, statuesque, disciplined, silent. But beneath that stillness was something deeper, a kind of peace that only those who have faced both war and misunderstanding could truly carry. The tourists gathered, as they always did, cameras raised, children pointing, the shuffle of excitement blending with the sound of ceremony. Few among them realized that the man standing before them had taken a full-force kick to the face less than 48 hours ago, and chosen not to retaliate until it became necessary. Among the onlookers, near the back of the crowd, stood Ryan Cole. He wore no designer jacket this time, no team logo, no entourage. Just a plain coat and quiet eyes that watched not as a fighter, but as a student. The bruise on his pride was invisible, but the lesson had carved itself into his posture, a humility that needed no announcement. He didn't bring a camera. He didn't post a story. He simply stood and observed, letting the rhythm of the ceremony wash over him, the precision, the timing, the control. Every movement that once seemed mechanical now looked deliberate, powerful, earned. As the changing of the guard began, Harrison shifted in perfect synchronization with his unit, each motion executed with the unbroken calm of a man who no longer needed to prove anything. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the courtyard. No words, no gestures, just recognition of lessons learned and respect restored. Ryan lowered his gaze first, and in that gesture, there was something new, not defeat, but understanding. Standing beside him was Colonel James Walker, hands clasped behind his back, the faintest smile beneath his weathered features. He spoke quietly, more to himself than to Ryan. Funny thing about strength, he said. The louder it shouts, the less of it there usually is. Ryan nodded slowly. I get that now. Walker regarded him thoughtfully. Do you? Ryan's lips curved into a faint smile. Not completely, but I know where to start. The colonel gave a single approving nod, then turned his attention back to the ceremony. Then you've already come farther than most. As the final command echoed across the courtyard, the guards rotated with mechanical precision, the ritual complete, the silence settling like a benediction. Ryan stood motionless long after the crowd began to disperse. He waited until the last of the tourists drifted away before stepping closer to the railing, watching as Harrison resumed his unbroken stance. He wanted to say something, gratitude, apology, acknowledgement, but none of it seemed adequate. So he did the only thing that felt right. He bowed his head, briefly, respectfully, and left without a word. That evening, the footage of the altercation began circulating online, a 30-second clip stripped of context, of humility, of the lesson itself. Comments flooded in, debates, outrage, mockery. But somewhere, quietly uploaded under Ryan's official account, appeared a new video titled The Day I Was Humbled. It wasn't flashy. No music. No edits. Just Ryan sitting in a plain room, speaking to the camera. I thought being a champion meant being fearless, he began. but it actually means knowing when not to fight. That day, I met a man who stood still, and in that stillness, I saw strength greater than any I've ever known. He paused, exhaled, then looked into the lens. This isn't a video about martial arts. It's about respect. For those who stand guard, for those who serve quietly, and for those who choose discipline over ego. I'll never forget that. The video ended without music, without outro, just silence. In the days that followed, millions watched. But the most important view came from a quiet corner of the barracks, where Guard Harrison sat at a metal table, watching on a small phone. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened, just slightly. He closed the screen, set the phone down, and returned to cleaning his rifle. Outside, the city moved on. Tourists gathered. Cameras clicked. The world resumed its endless rhythm. And through it all, the guard stood still. Stillness, not as a void, but as power. A strength that never needed to shout. What would you have done in Ryan's place? Would you have seen the warrior behind the silence, or mistaken calm for weakness? Tell us in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the greatest power is to remain still.